Are we truly alone in the universe? Today we cover some of the scariest encounters with unidentified flying objects and possible evidence of life beyond our planet. From mysterious sightings to groundbreaking missions, today we explore possible evidence of extraterrestrial life that will blow your mind. At the time of this recording, NASA has just launched a craft the other day set to head to Jupiter's moon to discover if life exists there. On October 14th, NASA launched the Europa Clipper spacecraft on a mission to explore Jupiter's moon, Europa, which scientists believe might have conditions suitable for life. The spacecraft lifted off from Kennedy Space Center in Florida on a SpaceX Falcon Heavy rocket. This mission aims to investigate Europa's subsurface ocean, hidden beneath an ice shell that could be up to 25 kilometers thick. Europa is about a quarter of the size of Earth, but it's believed to contain twice as much water as all of Earth's oceans combined. This makes it one of the most promising locations for finding potential life out in space, at least that we know of. The Europa Clipper is the largest spacecraft ever built for a planetary mission. It's about 100 feet long, equipped with 9 scientific instruments designed to measure the internal ocean and analyze the composition of the moon's surface. The spacecraft will conduct 49 close flybys of Europa starting in 2031, getting as close as 15.5 miles to the surface. So unfortunately, we do have quite a while to wait before we hear anything, but the fact that NASA is actively seeking out life on a distant moon is pretty cool. Fingers crossed they find something. Just last year, NASA released a highly anticipated 36-page report on UFOs, or UAPs, and there were some interesting takeaways. They looked into hundreds of sightings but concluded that they didn't find any solid evidence that aliens were behind any of them. Still, they didn't completely rule out the possibility either. NASA Administrator Bill Nelson made it clear that the agency is stepping up its game in researching these mysterious encounters. He said they'll be using better tech and artificial intelligence to dig deeper into them. The report is pretty technical, but one key takeaway is that it stated there is no reason to conclude extraterrestrial sources are responsible for these sightings. But the report also didn't deny the possibility of, quote, potential unknown alien technology operating in Earth's atmosphere. So that's pretty cool. Nicola Fox, who's part of NASA's Science Mission Directorate, said UAPs are still one of our planet's biggest mysteries. The challenge? A lot of the data they have just isn't good enough to draw any solid conclusions about what these sightings really are. To tackle this, NASA brought in a new director of UAP research, but they're keeping their identity a secret. This person will build a database to track and analyze future sightings, and using AI and machine learning. It's a smart move, especially since Dr. Daniel Evans mentioned that some members of the UAP panel had faced, quote, actual threats, which is unsettling. So keeping the new director's identity hidden is really about protecting their safety. The Falcon Lake incident began on May 20th, 1967 in Falcon Lake, Manitoba, Canada. This event has often been called Canada's best documented UFO case, and for good reason. It all started with Stephen McCallick, an industrial mechanic and amateur geologist. He was exploring the area in search of precious metals when he suddenly heard a commotion from a flock of geese, and he looked up to see 2 strange objects hovering about 150 feet away, which he described as cigarette-shaped things with humps in the middle, glowing with a reddish hue. One of the crafts then landed on a nearby rocky platform, transforming into a shiny disc that looked like, quote, hot stainless steel. McCallick sketched the craft for about a half an hour before deciding that he wanted to get a closer look. As he approached, he noticed it was completely smooth, but the craft had an open door where he could hear muffled voices. Then he reached out and touched the craft, which was so hot it melted the fingertips of his gloves. As he turned to leave, understandably, a panel then opened up, releasing a blast of heated gas that knocked him back, setting his clothes on fire. McCallick barely managed to escape, feeling nauseous and disoriented. He was so sick he was unable to eat solid food in the days following the incident, and was treated for burns that doctors said resembled radiation injuries. His story caught the attention of the RCMP, the Royal Canadian Air Force, and even US authorities. And when they reached the site that McCallick said he spotted the craft, authorities found a 15-foot ring of burnt vegetation, and there were highly radioactive elements found in soil samples and in the clothing McCallick had been wearing on the day of the encounter, which he had to rip off because they were on fire. And there was also superheated metal that had melted into the cracks of rocks, also highly radioactive. Till this day, the case has not been explained. This incident is referred to as South Africa's Roswell, the Kalahari crash. Kind of tells you how significant this one was. So the story goes that this whole incident was covered up. Some of the details of this one are a bit vague, and some chalk this up to being a hoax, but there were supposed leaked documents describing the following events. So this was an unusual event that took place over the Indian Ocean on May 7th, 1989. According to reports, a fast-moving object, believed to be a UFO, was spotted by naval personnel. In response, fighter jets were sent to intercept and target it. The UFO was successfully hit and crashed in the Kalahari Desert, leaving a noticeable skid mark. Shortly after the crash, a U.S. recovery team was swiftly deployed to gather evidence from the site and transport it to Patterson Air Force Base. And not only were parts of the aircraft retrieved, but the bodies of 2 alien beings as well. The Tic Tac UFO incident is one of the most compelling pieces of evidence in the world of unidentified aerial phenomena, or UAPs. On November 14th of 2004, retired Navy Commander David Fravor, a pilot with the USS Nimitz, had an encounter during a training exercise off the coast of Southern California. Fravor was flying with Lieutenant Commander Alex Dietrich when they were directed to investigate an unusual radar signal detected by the USS Princeton, another ship in their strike group. The radar operators had spotted, quote, multiple anomalous aerial vehicles that descended from 80,000 feet to sea level in less than a second. Fravor and Dietrich diverted to get a closer look, and as they approached, Fravor described seeing a small white object that looked almost like a Tic Tac, hovering above the ocean waves. He recalled in a 2021 interview that the object seemed to respond to their movements, as if it was aware that they were there. The Tic Tac was about the size of Fravor's jet, but had no visible markings, no wings or exhaust plumes. He attempted to cut it off, but the object accelerated away so quickly that it vanished from sight, only to be detected 60 miles away in less than a minute. Fravor stated, "I think what we experienced was well beyond the material science and the capabilities that we had at the time, that we have currently, or that we're going to have in the next 10 to 20 years. This incident came out in a report revealing over 500 sightings since 2004, some of which, including this one, are still unexplained. The 1952 Washington, D.C. UFO incident, often referred to as the Washington Flap, is one of the craziest UFO reports in history. Over 2 weekends in July of that year, people in the Capitol began reporting a series of strange sightings in the sky. On the night of July 19th, radar operators at Washington National Airport picked up a cluster of unknown objects flying at incredible speeds. Ground witnesses described seeing bright lights darting around erratically. The following night, the sightings continued, and the U.S. Air Force sent up fighter jets to chase the mysterious objects. Pilots in the jets reported seeing glowing lights that seemed to defy the laws of physics, making sudden accelerations and sharp turns that no conventional aircraft could replicate. Air Force Lieutenant Colonel Richard French was an investigator for Project Blue Book in the 50s. In 2013, during a citizen hearing on disclosure, he told a pretty wild story. While working for Project Blue Book, his job had often just involved debunking UFO sightings, but there was one incident that he had no explanation for. French recounted an incident had happened while he was investigating off the coast of St. John's, Newfoundland. Reports had come in about 2 mysterious aircraft that supposedly crashed in the water. French followed a group of around 100 onlookers gathered on a nearby wharf. What he saw next was something he'd never be able to forget. He described encountering 2 to 3 foot tall beings that were thin and gray, seemingly working on their damaged crafts in the water. French and the onlookers watched as these strange beings repaired their vessels right before his eyes. Then the craft lifted out of the water and shot off into the sky. He never included this sighting in his official reports at the time, probably fearing he'd be laughed out of his job. The Indian Ocean has a long history of mysterious sightings, with reports of strange underwater objects dating back as far as 1873. A number of sailors have described encounters with these massive mile-wide discs lurking beneath the surface of the water, sometimes accompanied by eerie lights. One of the earliest documented sightings occurred on March 23, 1873, when the ship Adelheid was navigating the South China Sea. Crew members claimed to see this huge glowing circular object floating just below the water. And then, May 15, 1879, the crew of the HMS Vulture spotted two enormous Ferris wheel type objects spinning in opposite directions. Each spoke about 25 feet wide and spaced about 100 feet apart. On April 14, 1901, sailors aboard the SS Kilwa reported beams of light shining from an underwater disc-like object in the Persian Gulf. Then in 1943, a sailor named Matthew Mangle noticed a massive glowing disc keeping pace with his ship. Next on the list, we have the Rendlesham Forest incident. This one is very well documented. It took place in December of 1980 near the Rendlesham Forest in Suffolk, England. Late at night on December 26th of 1980, military personnel witnessed strange lights descending into the forest. At first they figured it was just a downed aircraft, a known one. What they found definitely seemed to be an aircraft, just not one they'd ever seen before. They came across what seemed to be a metallic object on the forest floor and would see strange lights in the sky. Some reported that the object they saw was triangular and emitted strange beams of light. One of the airmen even claimed to have touched the object. There are official documents that have been released about this story with full reports by the military personnel at the site, and what they described was pretty strange. Now, did they actually encounter an alien spacecraft? It's debatable, but what is clear is that they saw something out of the ordinary. And finally, we have one of the most mysterious and destructive crash landings of all time, the Tunguska event. On June 30th, 1908, a massive blast hit this remote area of Russia. The event is believed to have been caused by the airburst of a large object of some kind, most likely a comet or asteroid, entering Earth's atmosphere and exploding in mid-air. The explosion released an enormous amount of energy and flattened about 80 million trees in the area. Now, luckily this happened in a very remote area, so only trees were affected, but that also means there were very few witnesses. A handful of people did report seeing a bright bluish light in the sky though, accompanied by a series of thunderous noises. And there's always been this question as to whether this was caused by a space rock or something else. Apparently there was also mutated plant life after this impact, and Joseph Stalin is rumored to have even conducted secret experiments in the area, but that's more of an urban legend. A strange UFO sighting was captured over New Jersey recently. In a 13-second clip shot near Atlantic City on a Sunday night back in December, a strange white light blinks in the sky before suddenly vanishing. Family members who were watching the light in the sky were completely baffled by what they were looking at. The thing just kind of hovers in the sky, slightly flickering before it looks like it disappears. Turns out that's not exactly the case. A man named Tim Janicki, who received the footage from a friend, posted it online with the heading reading, "I don't trust random videos I see on X, but this is 100% real." So this video has been getting shared around quite a bit. One commenter pointed out, "You can see it didn't just disappear, but it took off with incredible speed. There's a small flash of light to the left as it leaves. Humans can't produce the energy required to go that fast, especially from standstill." And that's true. If you look closely, you do see this really quick blip of light appear in the upper left of the screen right after the strange orb of light looks like it vanishes. Other people commented similar things, like one person saying, "No flight system we have right now can go from stationary to warp drive in an instant. These flight characteristics are well beyond light years ahead of us." Now, this is just one incident in a long list of strange sightings in the sky over New Jersey, which led the FAA to briefly limit drone flights in some areas. The FBI and other federal agencies have been looking into a bunch of the reports apparently, and they claim that so far they haven't found anything pointing to a national security threat. Again, so they say. This footage here was posted to Reddit by user Yogurt Closet Flat 5701 just a couple weeks ago with the caption, "This just happened above Brookville Boulevard, Snake Road in Queens, New York, right next to JFK Airport. We looked up and there were 4 orange orbs in formation in what is supposed to be a no-fly zone. They then started to disappear. Did anybody else in the area witness this?" End of post. And that's a good question. Any New Yorkers in the comments see this as well? Let us know down in the comments here. There are some interesting comments from other witnesses on the post though. One user, Zora Octavia, wrote, "Lived here for 14 years with planes flying by all day, every day. They fly so low it feels like you can almost touch them. I know what they look like when they come into land and take off. I have never seen anything like this. Ever." And that's not the only strange orange orb that's been spotted in the sky recently. On December 26th, a Redditor by the name of Hell84 posted this footage. The video was shot in central Georgia. A father had gone to take out the trash when he spotted the strange orb in the sky. He noticed something, quote, bright and orange overhead through the pines. He pointed it out to his son and they both just stared at it for several minutes before deciding to film it. The father shared the video on Reddit. In the clip we see this glowing orange orb gliding across the sky, weaving between the tops of pine trees. At one point, the orb looks like it dims and then vanishes entirely. As Hell84 wrote, "When I first observed it, the light was huge, but it was way off, like half a mile. As it got closer, it seemed to dim but stayed the same luminous lighting. As I walked further to capture it, I thought, what if it was trying to evade me?" A bunch of Redditors wondered if it could be a plane, but the user didn't think so, saying it made no sound, unlike the planes that frequently fly over his home. And we're back to New Jersey with another set of strange lights in the sky captured on camera recently. A YouTuber named CJ Faison recently posted footage showing what he believes are drones flying in, quote, deliberate formations off the coast of New Jersey over the Atlantic Ocean. He took a boat 26 miles out from the Pine Barrens to get the footage using a night vision camera. In the video, he'd gone out to get footage of the mysterious drones that people have been spotting in the skies over the last couple months. He did manage to capture a bunch of these blinking lights in the sky. Some are stationary, some are seen moving through the sky, some appear and disappear completely, and some of the drones seem to zip across the horizon at incredible speeds. It is definitely odd. CJ wrote in the video description, "The drones in New Jersey have been seen coming from the ocean for several weeks. We found UAP drones in the middle of the ocean 100%. This is something they don't want you to see." Now, sure, people have access to drones nowadays. There are more things in the sky than there ever have been in history, but it seems like people are spotting particularly bright, rather large objects moving at speeds way too fast to be your over-the-counter drone. And again, the FBI is getting involved. They've investigated around 5,000 reports about these drones, claiming that about 100 of them are considered credible. As of now, there have been no clear answers from authorities on who's behind the drones or what they're up to. This next report comes out again from New Jersey. This time, it's not just lights in the sky though. Whatever this object was, it actually affected the clock in a family's car. In early December, a family reported a strange effect while following one of these strange crafts that people have been seeing in the sky. As they drove along, the car's clock suddenly changed time, then went back to normal once they drove away. Local law enforcement in Morris County insists that there's no known threat to public safety, but residents are still trying to figure out what's going on themselves. There's even a Facebook group with over 17,000 members exchanging info on these sightings. One local software engineer, Rich Dunjewski, thinks the clock change might be a clue. He commented, "Many newer cars get their clock time from GPS satellites," adding that the drones could be using GPS jamming or spoofing. He went on to say that if these drones are using, quote, GPS jamming, then it's plausible the car would follow the signal and change the clock. FAA contractor David Lombardo agreed, saying these drones likely have electronic interference capabilities. A strange UAP was captured on camera back in 2018, but the video was kept secret for years. It was just released to the public last year in January of 2024. The object was spotted flying over a US military base in Iraq and was tracked by a military infrared radar. It moved across the base before making a controlled descent into a body of water. About 17 minutes later, it reappeared and took off at an incredible speed. The Pentagon has officially classified it as a UAP. What caught a lot of attention was how quickly the object changed color. You'll notice that the object keeps switching from this semi-translucent look to black. And since the video was shot using infrared, the color changes indicate shifts in temperature. The object was changing temperature so fast that it actually made it difficult for the radar to even track. And according to Dr. Matthew Sadagas, a physics professor at the University of Albany, it was doing this, quote, faster than any known object. object. This next video comes from the YouTube channel Plant Abundance, who wrote in the description that he'd been outside doing some tree work when this bright object caught his eye. He watched it as it stayed stationary for about a minute and a half before fetching his camera. He caught the tail end of it before it drifted downward and faded out. Again, this is another recent clip posted on October 14th of 2024. Now the object is hard to make out. It's obviously pretty high up, but zooming in, it's definitely not a plane or a satellite. It doesn't even look like your typical drone. It looks like a spherical metallic object. So what is it? I don't know. What do you all think? This footage was taken a few years ago. It's another spherical flying orb. The AARO, the office within the US Department of Defense that handles UAPs, released the footage captured by an MQ-9 Reaper drone during a Senate hearing in the Middle East. The video shows an orb smoothly flying through the sky at a high speed. The AARO came out saying that they had no idea what it was, calling it a genuine UAP, but they also mentioned it was not the first time they'd seen something like it. On December 16th of 2024, tourists at Disney World in Orlando caught sight of a glowing red UFO streaking upward in the night sky. The object kinda looks like a falling star, but in reverse. The video made the rounds on TikTok with people commenting it was a UAP of extraterrestrial origin. Now, unlike a lot of the other stuff on this list, this one may have a very clear explanation, and while that explanation probably isn't aliens, it's still pretty cool. The glowing streak was probably a SpaceX rocket that launched that night. Falcon 9's reusable booster successfully landed in the Atlantic after 8.5 minutes. SpaceX was transporting a GPS satellite for the US military. There was a similar sighting near Disney on December 23rd, also very likely a SpaceX mission. So this final story comes from a new docu-series called Investigation Alien. Footage was captured showing a strange object descending into the English Channel. The series follows journalist George Knapp and his team, including underwater archaeologist Rory Kremer, as they dig into evidence of extraterrestrial life. During one of their expeditions off the coast of Normandy, they spotted an illuminated object about 200 yards away. At first, it was stationary, but then it sped off, only to return later. But at that point, most of the crew was asleep. Kremer, though, was on night watch, and he was able to capture the object on camera as it plummeted into the water. Knapp was shocked when he saw the footage. He returned Kremer for an explanation, and Kremer, who's been in the field for over 20 years, admitted, "I don't got any answers, do you?" He thought it might be a flare, but it didn't have the typical smoke. As the object disappeared into the water, Knapp suggested it could be tied to some sort of subterranean base. Kremer pointed out that local tribes in the region have long reported unexplained lights, which were often linked to gods. They both agreed that the footage could be evidence of something much bigger lurking beneath the surface. Now, is this story legit or just a clever way of promoting the series? That's for you to decide. But based on everything on this list, could very well be alien.
Now, if you know anything about UFOs, you know about the Roswell incident that took place on a farm in Roswell, New Mexico back in 1947. But if you don't, here's the quick notes. In 1947, a UFO crash landed on Mac Brazel's farm. He didn't think much of it until UFO reports started coming out in the local newspaper. Brazel notified local authorities, the Air Force got involved, the crashed object was taken to Area 51, and the whole thing was written off as a crashed weather balloon, despite Brazel and military personnel claiming otherwise. Well, did you know that from 1947 to 2018, the crash site was a designated no-go zone? That's right, the entire area was closed off to the public for an entire 71 years, likely so the government could cover all their bases in ensuring that the public would never know the true nature of the crash. In 2018, the site was finally reopened to the public, but unfortunately, at this point, all evidence of what was most definitely an alien spaceship — you don't close off an area for 71 years because of a crashed weather balloon — is now long gone.
The Kecksburg UFO case has to be one of the strangest UFO cases in history. On December 9th, 1965, people in 6 US states, as well as parts of Canada, reported spotting a fireball streak across the sky over Detroit, Michigan, and Windsor, Ontario. Then folks in the small village of Kecksburg, Pennsylvania, claimed to see something crash into the woods after seeing wisps of blue smoke and feeling vibrations. Authorities cordoned off the area and searched the forest, later claiming to find nothing and saying the object was likely just a meteor. But that didn't line up with what a number of witnesses had seen. People who did manage to get close to the crash site described seeing a large acorn-shaped object partially buried in the ground. It was about the size of a small car and had strange markings that almost looked like hieroglyphics. But they didn't get a very long look before the military stepped in. So what exactly was this object? Was it a Soviet satellite? A piece of top-secret military equipment? Was it not from Earth at all? This case is nowhere near as famous as something like Roswell, but it has come up on shows like Unsolved Mysteries, and UFO investigators still reference it to this day. But the truth as to what really crashed into the forest is still undisclosed.
Since the Roswell incident, New Mexico has been a hot spot for UFO sightings. UFO crashes, however, are far less common, but they still do happen, no matter how much the FBI and the Pentagon wants us to think they don't. Luckily, free speech is still more or less a thing. Or we probably never would have heard of the March 25th, 1948 UFO crash at Hart Canyon Hiking Trail, in which a spacecraft of unknown origins crashed into the mesa and was promptly recovered and covered up by the United States Air Force and 5th Army Division. According to a plaque located at the site, the recovery operation took a total of 2 weeks to complete, and all materials taken from the site were brought to the Los Alamos Laboratory for scientific study and evaluation. According to eyewitness reports, the spacecraft was approximately 100 feet in diameter and 18 feet tall. And according to insiders, it had been transporting as many as 16 extraterrestrials who, unfortunately, all died on impact.
In the spring of 1941, 6 years before the infamous Roswell incident, something crashed just outside Cape Girardeau, Missouri. A local Reverend William Huffman had been called to perform last rites at the site, and when he arrived, he was shocked to see a strange metallic saucer-shaped object. Around it were small bodies, and the bodies didn't look human. He claimed the bodies were about 4 feet tall, with large heads and eyes and thin limbs. The military quickly took control, removing the wreckage and the bodies, and the incident was hushed up. The story remained mostly a family secret until years later, when Huffman's granddaughter, Charlotte Mann, recounted what her grandmother had told her. According to Mann, her grandfather also saw strange hieroglyphic-like symbols inside of this craft, similar to those described in other UFO crash stories. No official documents confirming the crash have ever been released, but some say this is just another example of a successful government cover-up.
While Ohio's Wright-Patterson Air Force Base is not believed to be a secret crash site, many people do claim that it is a place where crashed UFOs are taken to be studied and reverse engineered. Specifically in Hangar 18, the legendary alien warehouse located on the base, where many UFO enthusiasts believe the government hides flying saucer debris, the remains of extraterrestrials, and even live aliens. Speculation of the base began after the Roswell incident in 1947, and it has continued to this day, with many people claiming that reliable sources have confirmed its existence, i.e. former military personnel. One such man was a military pilot named Oliver Henderson, who allegedly told his wife that while working for the base he was required to fly a plane filled with UFO debris and several small alien bodies from Roswell to the Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. Another former pilot, Marion Black Mac McGruger, claimed that scientists at the base conducted experiments on a live extraterrestrial being and ended up killing it. Many other experiments are said to have been carried out at the base as well, although according to the FBI, the Pentagon, and the government, it's just a regular Air Force base where everything is completely above board.
On May 21st, 1953, there were a number of reports that a UFO crashed in the desert near Kingman, Arizona, and that the military had quickly swooped in to cover it up. Arthur Stansel, a mechanical engineer working for the Air Force at the time, claimed that he was part of a team that was rushed to the crash site to investigate and recover the debris. He described seeing a small disc-shaped craft partially buried in the ground. It was made of a shiny metallic material, and there were no visible seams or rivets, which made it look like it was molded from a single piece of metal. It was unlike anything he'd ever seen, and he also claimed to have seen the body of a creature being held in a tent next to the crashed aircraft, stating he saw, quote, the dead body of a 4-foot human-like creature in a silver metallic suit. The skin on its face was dark brown. And of course, this was all covered up, with the material being loaded onto trucks and transported to an undisclosed location.
I have to say, I love a good whistleblower moment, especially when the whistleblowing is being done by military veterans in open court, and it's regarding the evidence of little green men. What a time to be alive. In July of 2023, 3 military veterans testified in a Congress hearing about UFOs and claimed that the United States government had been operating a secret UFO reverse engineering program for at least the past few decades. Claims were also made that the United States did in fact recover non-human biologics from certain alleged crash sites. Of course, the veterans were unable to go into extensive detail about the missions and operations that led to the discoveries and projects involving UFOs because they are obviously classified. But the simple act of the 3 men, Ryan Graves, Executive Director of Americans for Safe Aerospace, David Grush, retired Air Force Major, and David Fravor, retired Navy Commander, openly admitting to the existence of both UFOs, alien life forms, and secret government programs regarding the two in open court, it's pretty huge.
On November 9th of 1974 in Carbondale, Pennsylvania, 3 teenage boys reported seeing a glowing object streaking across the sky before crashing into a nearby pond. They described the object as round and emitting a strange light, which continued to glow even after it hit the water. People started showing up at the scene, gawking at this mysterious object in the pond, and as word spread, more and more people gathered, and soon local police and fire departments arrived on scene. Witnesses claimed they saw them retrieve a small metallic object, which was then covered and taken away on a truck. Official explanations later claimed that this object was just a railroad lantern that had been thrown into the pond, but some weren't so convinced, and even today people still wonder if something more mysterious had actually plummeted into the water that night.
Prior to 1967, Shag Harbor, located at the southern tip of Nova Scotia, Canada, was a pretty understated fishing village. And then a UFO came to town. On October 4th, around 11:20 p.m., residents of Shag Harbor watched as a mysterious object descended from the sky and crash landed on the water. Witnesses claimed that the craft had 3 to 4 glowing orange lights and that it was about 60 feet in length. After landing in the water, the lights began to dim until eventually all that was left was a yellowish foam, indicating that the craft had either moved too distant to be seen or that it had sunken into the icy waters of Shag Harbor. Authorities searched the area until about 3 a.m., but nothing was ever found, nor has it been to this day. Although it was confirmed that the object was not a civilian or military aircraft, all of those had been accounted for. The day after the incident, the Rescue Coordination Center filed a report with Canadian Forces headquarters claiming that something had in fact touched down in the waters of Shag Harbor and that it was of unknown origin. As I said, to this day, the object has yet to be recovered. Maybe we'll get lucky this year.
On April 18, 1962, people across multiple states witnessed something flying through the sky, which eventually crashed near the Nellis Air Force Base outside Las Vegas. The object was tracked by NORAD, which made its way across 10 US states. The object was described as a bright red or blue fireball. It was first seen on the East Coast just outside of Syracuse. Things got even stranger when the object apparently landed at one point. An Air Force spokesman said the object was on the ground for about 42 minutes and that during this time a nearby power station mysteriously lost all power. As soon as the object took off again, the power was restored. The Air Force sent out jets which pursued it across the country. Then over the Mesquite Range in Nevada, the UFO exploded in a brilliant glare that was so bright it was visible over 5 states. What makes this case so incredible is the number of witnesses. Having crossed from the East Coast to the West Coast, the UFO was seen by thousands of people. But was it just a meteor or was it something else? That whole part about it landing and then cutting off power, that's very strange. That has not been explained. And we're going to start things off with Point Dume underwater base. So off the coast of Point Dume in Malibu, there seems to be this mysterious structure lying about 6 miles underwater. Images captured on Google Earth show an oval-shaped object resting on the seabed floor. Looks like it has a large flat top and what seems to be pillars or columns. Looking at it, it definitely looks like the entrance to something. It sits about 2,000 feet beneath the ocean surface, spanning nearly 3 miles in width, and some speculate that it could be more than just a naturally formed structure. And yes, some even think it could be an underwater alien base. Jimmy Church, who hosts a California-based radio show called Fade to Black, was pretty excited about the images, stating, "My first impression was that it was Greek. It looked artificial and didn't look natural. When you're looking at it from above, It's a nearly perfect oval shape. In the natural surroundings, nothing is symmetrical. Everything is eroded and covered in rocks and sloping and peaking. And right here, for 2 miles, it is a perfect oval with a black separation or outline to it. It just stands out that it has to be some type of roof. It's not unlike a dome stadium or a covered indoor racetrack or an Olympic arena. It's got that feel to it. It looks like a perfect oval man-made structure sitting on a construction site. Next up, we have the Solomon Islands UFOs. There have been some very strange things said to go on here for hundreds and hundreds of years, and not only have locals claimed to see strange lights in the sky, but also coming up from under the water as well, which has led to a pretty intense theory that there could be an underwater alien base there. There have always been local legends of monstrous giants on the islands, 10-foot tall, hairy creatures with flat noses and glowing red eyes. That, combined with the reports of strange lights in the sky, moving with incredible speed and agility, could mean there may be some kind of connection here. You see, some of these lights and strange flying objects have been seen descending down into the trees of the Guadalcanal or rising up from the ocean and zipping around before diving back down. There are also legends that these giants that are said to live on the island move around through subterranean tunnels. So some speculate that beneath the surface of the ocean is this hidden structure where extraterrestrial beings may be conducting their activities. Next up, we have Hy Brasil, a small mythological island off the coast of Ireland. According to Celtic folklore, this island is said to lie off the west coast of the country, appearing only every 7 years, usually surrounded by mist. The island is often described as a paradise with advanced technology and a society living in total harmony with nature. Sailors and explorers have reported spotting the island for centuries, claiming to have seen strange creatures and these glowing god-like beings there. Maps from the 14th to the 19th centuries often included Hy Brasil, but its exact location was always a bit of a mystery. Now, of course, it sounds like complete folklore, which Celtic culture is absolutely full of, but what if there's something else going on here? Well, some have suggested that the islands appearing and disappearing could have an extraterrestrial connection. The idea is that aliens could be using advanced cloaking technology or have a hidden base on or beneath the island, and the mysterious creatures that some sailors claimed to have seen on the island do sound like they could be alien-like, but it's still a total mystery as to what they'd be doing over there. Next up on the list, we have strange skulls that were found in an underwater cave in Mexico. So in 2012, divers were exploring a cenote and the Yucatan Peninsula where they came across 2 chambers full of human bones, and some of these bones were human skulls, but there was something off about them. They were elongated. Now, the ancient Maya were said to have performed human sacrifices in the area, and skull deformation was also practiced in various parts of Mexico way back when. There are theories as to why, but nothing entirely concrete. One idea is that high-ranking members of society had elongated skulls. Some say that people's skulls were elongated just to differentiate certain groups from one another, but there's also the theory that these skulls never belonged to human beings at all. Pretty common knowledge, of course, that there are tons of conspiracy theories surrounding the ancient Maya, including the presence of extraterrestrials that may have helped them construct all their intricate advanced cities. So could these skulls have belonged to these supposed alien beings? It's possible. Next up, we have the Lake Baikal incident. So this lake in southern Siberia is the world's largest freshwater lake by volume. It's incredibly deep, and there are some pretty eerie stories about it. First of all, there's all the mysterious lights that are reported, not just hovering or flying above it, but also coming from the depths of the water. And there's a very creepy story that was supposedly an attempted cover-up by the Russian government. So in 1982, a team of Navy divers were doing a routine diving exercise in the lake when a number of them started spotting something pretty disturbing. There were all these figures deep under the water. They were tall and slender, well over 6 feet tall, and wearing what looked to be silver suits. Those suits could have also been silvery scales. They also had large, circular, glowing, unblinking eyes. The creatures began chasing after the divers, or swimming after them, rather, and the divers panicked and then swam back up to the surface, and they reported what they'd seen to their superiors, but that's where the story ends. The existence of the strange creatures has never been confirmed or denied. Next up, we have underwater alien bases in Alaska. So claims of alleged alien bases lurking beneath the waters off the coast of Alaska have been around for quite a while, but in recent years, the idea of them has become more of a popular thing, mostly thanks to Ancient Aliens. Thank you, Ancient Aliens. But apparently, there are even eyewitness accounts dating back several decades, which have been mostly undisclosed until recently. UFOologists and UFO enthusiasts have now been turning their attention to the mysterious activities in the waters of Alaska. One incident dates back to 1945, when crew members of a ship reported spotting an unidentified craft. Researchers, including members of MUFON, or the Mutual UFO Network, which is a non-profit organization that studies reported UFO sightings, they think it's possible that extraterrestrial beings have been constructing bases beneath the ocean's surface, and that's because there are tons of reports of UFO movements over the water. There were also a number of UFO sightings in the 40s that weren't disclosed to the public at the time. These undisclosed reports allegedly provide evidence that there are extraterrestrial entities operating in the waters off the coast of Alaska. This next story comes to us from Reddit, and although what this person saw wasn't technically under the water, it was floating just above it, and it's a pretty fascinating account. The story comes to us from user Keslow, who writes, I used to live in Charleston, South Carolina back around 2006, and I had a job that had me leaving home at about 4 a.m. I lived in a bad part of town near the International Airport Joint Base, so when I left, I did a scan of the area before getting into my car. One morning, I stepped out of my home to do my scan and noticed that there were thin, wispy clouds flowing in off the ocean. Basically, it was a thin fog, about 1,000 to 1,500 feet up, moving like a river. I also noticed at this point that there were two effing moons. One is obscured by the thin clouds, our real moon, and the other is most definitely under the clouds. It was a sphere of glowing white light. It made no sound and did not move. After about 2 minutes, it bolted eastward towards the ocean. The glowing light faded quickly right as it took off as well. I've seen planes move near the speed of sound, and this thing went from 0 to like 3,000 miles per hour instantly. No acceleration. Much faster than the speed of sound with no sonic boom. I hope I don't see it again, especially on the water. I always wondered if it bolted because they saw me watching them. Next up, we have the strange reports of a large disc-like object being spotted in the Indian Ocean. Apparently, as far back as 1873, ships sailing the Indian Ocean from the Persian Gulf to the South China Sea have reported spotting a massive mile-wide disc passing beneath their boats, accompanied by large, rotating lights. One of the earliest documented sightings happened on March 23rd of 1873, when the ship Adelaide traversed the South China Sea. Witnesses reported floating over a huge, glowing circular object beneath the ocean's surface. On May 15th, 1879, the crew of the HMS Vulture described the sighting of two large Ferris wheels spinning in opposite directions. The spokes of these wheels were reported to be 25 feet wide, with 100 feet of space between them. There have been tons of these reports in various locations in the Indian Ocean, over the years. On April 4th, 1901, for example, in the Persian Gulf, the crew of the SS Kilwa claimed to see rays of light emanating from an underwater disc-like object. And even in 1943, in the Persian Gulf, a sailor named Matthew Mangle reported a huge glowing disc beneath the water's surface pacing his ship. And these are just a handful of examples. And coming in at second place is the Michigan Stonehenge. So in 2007, a professor of underwater archaeology, Mark Hawley, made a pretty incredible discovery. It was this arrangement of stones lying on the lake bed, looking a lot like Stonehenge in England. The stones are laid out in a circular pattern, and some even appear to be arranged in a line. They're about 40 feet below the surface of the lake. So what was the purpose of this formation? Could it be the remnants of an ancient civilization? Could extraterrestrials have constructed it thousands of years ago? They look like they've been placed in a pretty precise pattern. Doesn't look to be natural forming to me. And of course, there's also a rock with a mastodon carved into it. Hard to believe something like that would be created naturally. What's also really fascinating is that these stones are believed to be about 9,000 years old, predating Stonehenge by about 4,000 years. And finally, it's only natural that we finish things off with what has to be the most famous strange object discovered deep beneath the sea, the Baltic Sea anomaly. So back in the summer of 2011, a team of Swedish treasure hunters didn't come across any treasure in terms of monetary gain anyway, but they did find something pretty cool, a sonar image that seems to show a strange UFO-like object on the sea floor. Peter Lindbergh, the leader of the treasure hunting team, would be so awesome just to be able to say you're the leader of a treasure hunting team. I could say that and I'd just be like digging through my backyard finding nothing. But this guy actually goes out on boats and submarines and does it. I didn't get that job. Anyway, he's the leader of Ocean X and was pretty astonished by what he had found, saying the object definitely didn't look like a natural formation. And even though a number of researchers have come out and said it probably is a natural formation, I still get excited looking at this thing. I don't know, I'm just not entirely convinced. I'm on the fence about this one. But what do you guys think? Alien craft, ancient artifact, just some mundane natural formation? Let us know down in them comments.
Starting off this list, in our number 10 spot, we have the 1976 Tehran incident. The 1976 Tehran UFO incident is a notable case in UFOlogy that took place on September 19, 1976. The incident involved a luminous object that was observed hovering over the city by two F-4 Phantom II jet interceptors of the Iranian Air Force. The object was detected on radar and appeared to be capable of jamming the communication systems of the jets. The pilots reported that they saw a brightly lit diamond-shaped object that emitted a green light, and they attempted to engage it with missiles. However, the object evaded their attempts and quickly disappeared. At a pilots conference in 2007, one of the pilots in this incident, Parvez Jafari, said he attempted to fire at the UFO, but something strange was preventing him from doing so. He said, quote, "My weapons jammed and my radio communications garbled." The incident was investigated by the Iranian government and the US Defense Intelligence Agency, and it has been the subject of much speculation and debate among UFO enthusiasts. Some argue that the incident was evidence of extraterrestrial activity, while others suggest it may have been a secret military experiment or some kind of atmospheric phenomenon. Despite the official investigation, the incident remains unresolved and its true nature remains a mystery. In our number 9 spot today, we have the McMinnville UFO photographs. The McMinnville UFO photographs are a series of 2 photographs taken by Paul and Evelyn Trent on May 11, 1950 in McMinnville, Oregon. The photos depict a metallic disc-shaped object in the sky with trees and buildings visible in the foreground. The Trents claimed that they saw the object hovering in the sky and were able to capture it on camera. The photographs quickly gained widespread attention and were widely circulated in newspapers and magazines, and they were also examined by several experts, including the US Air Force, which conducted an investigation known as Project Blue Book. Famous project here on Most Amazing Top 10. The Trents maintained that the photographs were genuine and that they had not tampered with them in any way. However, some skeptics have suggested that the photographs may have been hoaxed or that the objects in the photographs were just a common object. Despite the controversy surrounding the photographs, however, they remain one of the most famous and well-known UFO sightings in history. The photographs have been the subject of numerous articles, books, and documentaries, and have inspired countless discussions and debates about the existence of UFOs and extraterrestrial life. In our number 8 spot today, we have the USS Nimitz Tic Tac UFO incident. This UFO sighting comes from 2004. On November 14th of that year, the USS Princeton noticed an unknown aircraft of some sort that was about 100 miles off of the coast of San Diego. For 2 weeks prior to this, the crew had been tracking a strange flying object that would start out at about 80,000 feet before extremely quickly dropping to hover right above the Pacific Ocean. Commander David Fravor and Lieutenant Commander Jim Slate went over in 2 fighter jets, and when they arrived, they saw what at first appeared to be churning water while there was an oval shape just below the surface. After this, the white oval-shaped object appeared above the water, but it had no markings on it. Like no windows, nothing that would indicate an engine, no wings, and the infrared monitors on the jets didn't pick up any sort of exhaust. The commander and lieutenant commander tried to intercept this strange aircraft, but it very quickly flew away and reappeared on the monitor 60 miles away. And when I say quickly, I mean it was moving at 3 times the speed of sound and over twice the speed of the fighter jets. So, faster than any kind of technology we currently have. We still don't know exactly what it was, but it certainly was beyond our current capabilities. In our number 7 spot today, we have the Aguadilla Airport incident. The Aguadilla Airport UFO incident occurred on April 25th, 2013, when a strange object was spotted hovering above the Rafael Hernandez Airport in Aguadilla, Puerto Rico. The object was initially detected by radar and later confirmed by security cameras as a glowing, unidentified object that appeared to be traveling at a low altitude. The object was described as being around 4 to 5 feet in length, and it moved very quickly and very erratically. It was also observed to emit a bright white light and appeared to be changing shape. The incident attracted widespread attention and was investigated by several government agencies, including the Federal Aviation Administration and the Department of Homeland Security. The object was ultimately classified as an unidentified flying object, or UFO, and no explanation was given for its presence in the area. It is even said that a US Customs and Border Protection aircraft actually captured infrared video of the incident that was given to the Scientific Coalition for UFOlogy by a whistleblower. This video is said to show the UFO traveling at super low altitudes, sometimes lower than the treetops, but at speeds close to 100 miles per hour. The Aguadilla Airport UFO incident is considered one of the most significant UFO sightings in recent history due to the high level of documentation and the involvement of government agencies. It continues to be a topic of discussion and speculation among UFO enthusiasts and researchers, and has contributed to ongoing efforts to uncover the truth about the nature and origin of UFO sightings around the world. In our number 6 spot today, we have the Project Blue Book sighting. Air Force Lieutenant Colonel Richard French was once tasked with being an investigator for Project Blue Book, which was the name used to describe a study of UFOs conducted by the United States Air Force from March 1952 to December 17, 1969, when the project was terminated. Okay, we talk about Project Blue Book a lot. You gotta know what it is. While his job was meant to be to investigate and essentially debunk UFO sightings, later in life he took to Congress to stand up and explain his own UFO encounter that he was never able to explain away. The moment that truly stuck with him all of these years took place back in 1952 when he was sent off to Newfoundland after there were reports of a UFO that had crashed off of the coast of St. John's. As he arrived to the scene, there were at least 100 people who all stood and stared into the water, and as he was able to follow their gaze and see what they were all looking at, he couldn't quite believe his eyes. He recalled the water being quite clear, and under it you could see 2 circular crafts, each one approximately 18 feet in diameter. He said that they were both floating just below the surface of the water, no more than 20 feet from the shore, and not only this, but he could also see 2 beings with the crafts. He said, quote, "The first thing I saw was the UFOs, and it was apparent to me that they were doing something to the craft, and I couldn't really tell what because they were on the bottom side of it and not visible to me except when they would occasionally get over to the side where I could see them." He claims he watched on as the beings worked on the craft until one of them raised out of the water and disappeared, but not before accelerating to speeds in the neighborhood of 2,500 to 3,000 miles per hour. In our number 5 spot today, we have the Coyne-Mansfield helicopter incident. The Coyne-Mansfield helicopter UFO incident occurred on October 18, 1973, when 4 members of the Ohio Army National Guard were flying in a helicopter over Mansfield, Ohio. Suddenly, they encountered a large metallic disc-shaped object that was hovering in the sky. The object began to move towards towards the helicopter, causing the crew to take evasive maneuvers. Despite their efforts, the object continued to follow them, eventually passing overhead and disappearing into the distance. The crew reported the incident to their superiors, and an investigation was launched by the military and the Federal Aviation Administration. The incident received significant media attention, and it remains one of the most compelling UFO sightings on record. What makes this incident particularly intriguing is the credibility of the witnesses. The crew were all experienced pilots with military training, and their account of the incident was corroborated by radar data and other witnesses on the ground. Despite extensive investigations, no satisfactory explanation has ever been offered for what they saw that day. In our number 4 spot today, we have Apollo 11. So we can sit here on Earth all day and talk about the potential for alien life and UFOs, but who would know more than the people who have actually been to space, which are of course astronauts. Definitely on the list of coolest and scariest jobs in the world, there haven't been a ton of people who have had the unbelievable privilege of experiencing space firsthand, but there are even less of them who have claimed to see something that seems completely unexplainable. People who have claimed these sorts of things include Edgar Mitchell, Catherine Coleman, and Dr. Brian O'Leary. The very interesting part about many of these claims is that they also include some sort of government cover-up as well with their claims. There was also Buzz Aldrin, who spoke about his Apollo 11 experience, and he detailed the crew seeing something flying alongside them, and at first they believed it was the final stage of a detached rocket, but then Mission Control confirmed that it was actually 6,000 miles away from them, leaving them with no answers on what the flying object could be. I can't imagine going to space at all, let alone encountering a UFO flying right beside you. Also, I can't believe that I hadn't heard of that story before, because to me, that sounds like full-blown alien contact. In our number 3 spot today, we have the Go Faster video. In 2017, after the existence of the Advanced Aviation Threat Identification Program became more well known, a video was released of an encounter between an FA-18 Super Hornet and some sort of unidentified flying object. This video was the third in a series of 3 videos, and there weren't a ton of details released about exactly what happened during this encounter. Using the Raytheon Advanced Targeting Forward-Looking Infrared Pod, they were able to capture an extremely fast-moving white oval that was around 45 feet long. The oval had no wings and didn't appear to have any kind of exhaust either. They were tracking the UFO at an altitude of 25,000 feet just above the Atlantic Ocean, and then they were shocked as the craft rotated on its axis and flew away. There was no explanation released with the footage because it truly is unbelievable and currently unexplainable. In our number 2 spot today, we have the Delphos Ring incident. The Delphos Ring UFO incident occurred on November 2nd, 1971 in Delphos, Kansas, when a family witnessed a strange object hovering over their farm. The UFO emitted a bright light that illuminated the surrounding area and left a glowing ring in the ground after it disappeared. The family reported the incident to the local sheriff, who took a sample of the ring for analysis. Investigations were conducted by several experts, including the Aerial Phenomena Research Organization, who collected soil samples and found that the ring was caused by the removal of topsoil, which had been exposed to a high amount of heat. Additionally, a high level of radiation was also detected at the site. The incident received widespread media coverage and sparked debates about the existence of extraterrestrial life and the possibility of alien visitation. Some skeptics argued that the incident could have been caused by natural phenomena or a hoax, but the witnesses maintained that they saw a genuine UFO. Despite the years of investigation, it's been no conclusive explanation for the incident has been found, leaving the mystery of the Delphos Ring UFO unsolved. In our number 1 spot today, we have the Shag Harbor incident. This incident took place on October 4th, 1967, when an unknown object crashed into the water near Shag Harbor, which is a tiny town in Nova Scotia. There were at least 11 people who witnessed this object as it crashed, and many people claimed to have heard a whistling sound followed by a loud bang when the crash took place. The witnesses that claimed to have seen the UFO were all doing a bunch of different things at the time. One couple was just sitting out on their porch, but the 2 witnesses that really get me are a flight pilot and a ship captain. On Air Canada Flight 305, First Officer Robert Ralph pointed out to Captain Pierre Charbonneau that there was something strange out the left side of the aircraft. They reported an object tracking along on a parallel course a few miles away and described it as a brilliantly lit rectangular object with a string of smaller lights trailing it. Shortly after they first noticed it, there was a large but silent explosion near the unknown object, and then 2 minutes later there was a second explosion, but this one faded to a blue cloud. cloud. As for the ship captain, Captain Leo Howard Mercy, he saw 4 blips on his Deca radar that were totally stationary. This led to him looking up to the sky, and this is when he saw 4 bright objects sitting in a rectangular formation about 28 kilometers from the vessel's window. He wasn't the only one who saw it on board either. The entire crew of nearly 20 fishermen stood on deck and watched. A man named Laurie Wickens was another one of the witnesses, and he and some friends ended up calling the RCMP, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, because they saw a huge object floating in the Atlantic Ocean about 1,000 feet offshore. This is all super weird, and not only the RCMP but also the Royal Canadian Navy and the Royal Canadian Air Force became involved in the investigation, but nothing was ever recovered or found. It was also revealed that all commercial, private, and military aircrafts along the eastern seaboard were accounted for, so what could have all those witnesses seen? Since they never officially identified what it was, in the official Government of Canada documents, it is listed as a UFO.
Number 10. Recent sighting. Middletown was shaken by an extraordinary event last month as residents reported witnessing a display of rotating green lights hovering above them. The inexplicable sighting, which occurred around 10:30 p.m., left many in awe and pondering the possibility of extraterrestrial activity. One individual, Caden Little, managed to capture the event on video while on Jerry Couch Boulevard. Caden described his initial reaction as a mix of fear and fascination, exclaiming, "I instantly thought like we're under attack by aliens. It was scary." Fortunately, the lights abruptly disappeared without any hostile action, providing some relief. Eyewitnesses, including Bryce Garrick, observed the lights rotating in a clockwise motion before swiftly darting across the sky and vanishing. The bewildering speed at which the lights maneuvered ruled out the possibility of drones, according to Brian Simpson, president of the Cincinnati Astronomical Society. So what was it? Who knows, but my bet is aliens. Number 9. The coin incident. At 7:30 p.m. on October 18, 1973, American Airlines Flight 21 encountered a UFO near Mansfield, Ohio, and reported it. This would be the first of dozens of sightings reported in the area that night. However, the most astonishing one took place 3 hours later and became known as the coin incident. Sometime after 10:30 p.m., an Army Reserve helicopter piloted by Captain Lawrence Coyne and a crew of 3 men was flying from Columbus to Cleveland when, somewhere around Mansfield, they noticed a red light on the horizon. They then realized that the object was heading straight for them at a high rate of speed. Coyne quickly descended to avoid collision, but as the men were preparing for impact, the object came to a halt in front of them and projected a green, pyramid-shaped beam over the helicopter. At the same time this was happening, the men reported the helicopter being pulled up and towards the UFO. However, it then let go and darted out of sight. The incident lasted 5 minutes. The men described a gray, metallic-looking dome-shaped object with a red light on one end and white light on the other. Now, interestingly, after the incident, according to one crew member, the helicopter never worked right again. Now, this whole incident was seen from the ground by a mother and her 2 children who pulled their car over to watch what was going on. They reported seeing the helicopter chasing an object that they said looked like limp, pear-shaped, and as big as a school bus. Number 8. Earliest photographs. A photo taken in St. Paris, Champaign County in 1932 is considered one of the earliest possible photographs of a UFO ever recorded. It shows George Sutton, a local resident, and what appears to be a classic UFO-shaped object over his left shoulder. Skeptics say the object is simply a street lamp, but according to the folklore that surrounds this image, there were no electric streetlights along this road in 1932, nor are any wires or poles visible in the image. Now, this photo is intriguing because it predates the flying saucer craze of the late 1940s and 50s. It was taken before the alleged Roswell UFO crash in 1947, and it was 6 years prior to the broadcast of the War of the Worlds in 1938, when some people believed aliens were attacking Earth. In other words, the person who took this photograph either captured a street lamp, a real UFO, or was way ahead of the curve in terms of pulling off a good hoax. But I'd like to think it's a real UFO. Number 7. The Carnival. As a way to raise money, Father Gregory Miller decided to host a carnival in August of 1949. The church sought help from Sergeant Donald R. Berger, and on the first night of the carnival, sometime after 8 p.m., he was operating the searchlight when it came upon a massive object in the sky. His log states the object was stationary, appearing as a glowing disc. When I moved the searchlight away, the disc continued to glow. He estimated the object to be around 25,000 feet high and reported that the sky was clear with a thin haze at altitude. continued. More than 100 people saw the object that night, including Father Miller. Maybe nothing more would have come from this incident, but the next day, local newspapers carried stories about strange lights being reported all over Cincinnati, not just at the carnival. At least 3 major newspapers in the area ran stories about the sighting, so it definitely was something. Number 6. 86-mile police chase. In Portage Country in 1966, law enforcement officers from several jurisdictions either witnessed or chased a UFO for 86 miles into Pennsylvania. The incident is considered one of the most thoroughly documented UFO cases on record. Portage County Sheriff Deputy Dale Spar and second deputy named Wilbur Neff came upon the UFO around 5:30 a.m. on April 17th. They were investigating an abandoned vehicle and they heard a humming or buzzing noise behind them, and they turned to see a UFO hovering just above a nearby tree line. A bright cone-shaped light came from beneath the object, illuminating the ground. They called into dispatch, which told them to keep an eye on the object. Just then, the object began to quickly move away. The two decided to give chase, and near the state line, a local police officer saw the object, followed by Spar and Neff chasing it. He decided to join in on the action. However, a short time later, just as the sun was rising, Spar began to run out of gas, so he and Neff and the local police officer pulled into a gas station, where they watched the object ascend several thousand feet into the sky and then straight into outer space, and, well, that was that. Number 5. October 11th, 1973. October 11th was quite the night for Ohio residents, as there were many UFOs spotted. In Dayton, at least 15 sightings were reported. Many witnesses reported seeing objects covered with red, green, and blue lights hovering over treetops in the area. A Montgomery County Sheriff's deputy reported seeing an oblong object covered with lights that appeared stationary in the sky at treetop level for several minutes until he tried to shine his cruiser spotlight on it. It then zoomed towards him and then shot straight up in the sky. Then in Troy, according to an article in the Columbus Dispatch from October 12, 1973, titled UFO Reports Proceed Boom, on October 11th, Troy patrolman Early Thomas and about 100 Troy residents said they watched a hovering red, green, and white object move across the southeastern sky. Now, just to note, this happens to be the direction of Wright-Patterson. About 15 minutes later, law enforcement agencies in Miami, Champaign, and Logan counties received hundreds of telephone calls after a sonic boom was heard. They received more calls when a second sonic boom was heard just after midnight, and it seems like the aliens had something special planned for that day to me. Number 4. Trumbull County UFO Incident. Featured on the History Channel and numerous UFO documentaries, the Trumbull County UFO incident in northeast Ohio is exceptional because it was witnessed by numerous police officers and a 911 dispatcher, all of whom were being recorded as they spoke back and forth about the strange events unfolding the evening of December 14th, 1994. It was also seen by many members of the public as well. Now, around midnight, Trumbull County 911 began receiving calls from residents about strange low-flying lights in the sky. The dispatcher sent out Liberty Townsend police officers to investigate. One of them was Sergeant Toby Melrose, who saw a light. He got out of his car and looked up to see what he described as a giant circular-shaped object and intensely bright in the center section. It made no sound at all. The object was there for about 30 seconds before moving away. Shaken, Sergeant Melrose decided to chase the object, as did many other police officers in the area. At least 14 law enforcement officers saw the object that night, with all of them discussing it openly on their radios. Number 3. 1973. There were many UFO sightings in 1973 in Ohio and its surrounding states. For example, in Columbus on September 30th, a Franklin County man claims to have discovered a landing site near his home after seeing a strange object in the sky. Weeds at the alleged site are crushed to the ground in a semi-oval area 20 by 30 feet wide. The man says the object whooped down in a zigzag pattern and dropped below the trees. There are several dozen sightings of strange objects in the sky reported in the area that night. Then in Middletown on October 7th, a giant orange-colored cigar-shaped object with 5 discs following it and making no sound is reported flying over the city at 10 p.m. Many people see it, and Wright-Patterson receives numerous calls. Now, these are just 2 examples of that year, but there are many, many more. Number 2. Circleville. On August 26, 2022, Pete Hartinger said UFOs were spotted in the area. An expert on the topic who has seen a UFO with his own eyes, Pete said several people reported seeing UFOs between 9 p.m. and 11 p.m., including a man who saw something in the sky as he was traveling on US 23 north of Circleville. He saw strange lights, and going on down, he saw some more strange lights. He knows some other people who saw them too, he said. The man said it wasn't right the way the lights were acting. The lights came down, hit the ground, and went back up, so forget about them being flares. Pete said the man, who wishes to remain anonymous, reported what he saw to the Roundtown UFO Society, a local group dedicated to studying these matters. Anybody who has seen strange, mysterious lights that have been in the sky, please let us know, he said. He said at least half a dozen people saw the lights. One person said they saw orange lights over the fairgrounds, he said, and another person said he saw some military aircraft coming in after he saw those lights. Were they coming in to investigate, or what? Since 1947, there have been several sightings of UFOs in the Circleville area, which is strange. And coming in at number 1 is Ohio is a beacon. According to the Mutual UFO Network of Ohio, MUFON, the state ranks among the top 10 states in UFO reports. Thomas Wortman with the MUFON said, "It's all sorts of things we get. We get the individual who is out walking their dog at night who reports seeing unusual lights that they just can't explain. They see the lights for a few seconds or minutes and they just want an answer." Now, the majority of these reports come from Northeast Ohio, and Thomas says about 80% of what comes in the agency can be explained, but about 20% and up being classified as UFOs. Now, if you're waiting for the government to admit that aliens do exist, don't hold your breath, because the Time reports that the Pentagon isn't going to say that. But my question is, what is so special about Ohio?